Hello there, Coffee Chat friend. Somebody sent me an article, probably yesterday, got it in my mailbox this morning, to do with a topic I'm going to call changing our religion. Because it has to do with a tendency, which I talked about at one time before in an article, about how we human beings, men and women, sometimes have the tendency to, when we feel that we have seen the nonsense or the fallacies in our current religion, we will jump from that religion, eventually anyways, into some other form of religion. And what I mean by religion is just a system of belief that we haven't taken the time to rigorously look at for its inherent truth or not. It's basically in these cases where people like myself, I have done that, will basically have bought into a pitch of a certain religion that existed, and that in my case came from family upbringing. And then when I switched over to other ways of thinking, or other forms of believing rather, it was whatever was the latest sales pitch put forward by somebody else or groups of people. So it was like from here to there, but the basis of the belief system remained the same. It wasn't approached from a more holistic examination, which it didn't include a lot of intellectual rigor, or rather reasoning, evidence, and so on, right? So, why would I talk about this? What does this have to do with it? Well, for number one, the one who sent me this little article asked me to make a couple comments on it, but also along the lines of improving the quality of our life experience. I would say that truth, in my experience, has been I can relate to, or there's a corollary between it, with it, and quality of life experience. Truth and quality of life experience have a connection. Now, the quality of life experience can be, momentarily hampered, because it can be very uncomfortable sometimes to change our perspective on things. However, the long-term satisfaction of having made the right decision is priceless. I've had many examples of that, of having the opportunity to join business ventures. That would be the main thing, I think, or business opportunities, these sorts of things, which had great potential in many ways, say financially, but which didn't sit right with me in terms of the truth and whether it was the right thing to do. And having passed on those things, while in the short term was a challenge, in the long term it was the right thing, because it was confirmed to me later on that my decision was correct, because I was basing it on a principle, as we talked about earlier with principles. Now, this article was about how there's all kinds of religious beliefs in cosmic matrices and these sorts of things, which people somehow get the idea that this quest for enlightenment that we all want to be enlightened. We want to be lightened from our burdens, and we want to be as though the light is shining on truths. So we want to be enlightened. We want to enlighten ourselves, or be enlightened. And this article was talking about how many people will project themselves. They figure that there's this higher, another realm of some sort, another cosmic realm, that they will astrally project themselves into, or whatever. And the author is saying in there, that my understanding, that that is a it can be there can be value in all this sort of thing, if it's seen for what it is. But if we're thinking that our truths are out there somewhere, then we're just falling back into the same old, just a different version of the same old story of the gods. And the gods are out there, and they have the truths for us, and so on. And so he prefers to talk about an inner journey of what we can manage. I mean, there's the old practical standpoint too that I like to think about is there's controllables and uncontrollables in our lives, and the greatest level of controllability in our lives is within ourselves, within our bodies, within our minds, and this sort of thing. And we get control over what we eat, who we hang out with, and all those sort of things. On a very practical level, this is relevant to what he's saying, that all of this out there is out there. I mean, it's better to just leave it alone, I understand, and go on the inner travel. He also talks about the masters, the great masters. They didn't so much talk about all this out there stuff. In fact, they were usually killed or persecuted because they would talk to people about, work on yourself. And that's a very threatening thing, especially for God entities called governments, which most people operate within. They operate within fantasies called government, and or other control structures like religions. And anybody who's saying you can actually work on yourself, you don't need the priests, you don't need the politicians, you don't have to get all your information from these people, you can actually work through it yourself. And so from that perspective, I would say that most people are operating in sophistry. Sophistry is an old, it came from the Greeks, I believe, the sophists. These were paid philosophers. And it's interesting how that in itself doesn't sound nefarious whatsoever, but we have to be suspicious of anybody who's paid for something, because their first loyalty is to their paycheck. So the second meaning of the sophist, of sophistry, is one who reasons with clear but fallacious arguments. So, and the real masters, of course, if somebody is a master, they cannot be working in what is fallacious, because that's not mastery, right? So there's elements, of course, there's elements of fallacy in everything. I mean, some people are, and it doesn't matter whether somebody is conscious of it or not conscious of it. The one thing about truths and law and what is real and what is not real doesn't seem to matter whether we are conscious of it or not, whether we believe it or not, and these sorts of things. There are underlying governance. There's underlying governance, you might say, of ourselves and of the world, of the planetary, and of all that we can measure. There's underlying governance and rules and so on, and therefore we don't have to. It's better that we observe those rather than trying to project ourselves into what is the unknown, and what is made up, what is religion. The nature, I think, of us, and it's because it's easier, probably. It's easier in terms of our efforts, and it's also easier in terms of social acceptability to be in a religious belief system, because then we have a network of those who believe similarly. And if that gets too uncomfortable, that belief system, because it doesn't make any sense, it's easier just to join another manufactured one, because then, once again, it's easier. We can just subscribe to that. It's like getting a subscription out. And also there's a network of people involved in it. And we usually have also bought a sales pitch. So now we are congratulated in some ways for having bought a sales pitch. It's much more difficult to analyze why what we're believing is incorrect, and then from that keep going and establish truths. It becomes a lonely world in a way. But never, once again, coming back to that what we talked about earlier, loneliness and loneness. I like to call loneness a position of power, a position of, where loneliness is like that. It feels like I'm alone. I'm off in this wilderness by myself. But yeah, that's along the lines of my comment. That it's important to just recognize these things at first in terms of quality of life. Recognize our tendency to want to jump from one to another, but we're not really jumping from one to another. We're jumping from one frying pan into another frying pan without realizing, maybe I don't have to jump. It's a little bit harder at first. So you might have to jump over the other frying pan to land on something solid. And that's another thing too about this article. It talked about being grounded in places. And I like that word grounded because, in terms of this whole concept of meditation and flying astral projections and all these sorts of things where we're projecting ourselves into this higher, this greater whatever construct. But whereas what we can control is ourselves in a way. We have control, a certain level of control over ourselves, which in a way is sort of pictographically groundedness, because we're where we are. We're where we are and we're what we are. So remaining grounded is basically, to me, is getting in touch with our faculties. What's healthy for our bodies, what's healthy for our minds, what's healthy for us in terms of who we hang out with, what's healthy for us in terms of what we think about, what's healthy for us in terms of what we talk about, how we behave in our relationships with others. All these sorts of things are kind of a groundedness. And when we ask ourselves those questions, we begin to find very simple truths. And from those simple truths, things start to come together, and we can see so clearly eventually how what we've done is really nothing. Sometimes we think we have because we've joined a different political party, or we joined a different religion, or we got a new group of friends, or we got a new marriage, or we got a new job, or we moved to a different place. But when we haven't worked on ourselves, our groundedness, nothing really changes. Because it's just the furniture we've moved around. We've changed some pictures on the walls. But we haven't really changed, because all we've done is we've moved stuff out there which we really don't have a whole lot of control over. Our quality of life comes from working on ourselves, our fundamental quality of life. Because happiness comes, it's a feeling we have within, right? Feelings like happiness, contentedness, and these sorts of things. And these qualities can come without us changing the furniture. They can come from us working on ourselves and having the satisfaction of seeing things for how they are. And this is maybe going off a little bit, but I hope this was helpful to you who asked the question. Just my thoughts. It's not an answer to anything. It's just my thoughts. It's a comment. And hopefully it helps others as well. Hope we can do this again. I expect to do it again tomorrow. Some sort of a topic. If you ever have a topic you'd like me to comment on, please send me an email or reply to any of my videos, wherever they are. If there's a place below that you can comment, if and when I see it, I will do my best to reply. My name is Steve. I'll sign off for now, and I'll talk